Not content with your content? You've come to the right place. The Discontent Show with Joe Kuzma. Every brand starts with a story. Here's how you can grow your business by sharing it. Now, with today's topic, the host of The Discontent Show, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Discontent Show. My name is Joe Kuzma, and as I always say, as the lead-in is for this program, if you're not content with your content, you have come to the right place. I'd like to welcome all of our new and returning listeners. I truly appreciate you. Appreciate everyone who's been subscribing to the show, whether it be on iTunes, YouTube, or any of the other platforms that it's available on. It's also on Google Play. It's on Stitcher. It's all over the place if you do just a little search. And then there's the custom podcast apps and things of that nature. But I know all of you are here for tips and tricks and hints and some advice on your content marketing efforts. A lot of people think that content marketing is free and easy, and it can be. It can be if you make it efficient for yourself, and really the most time that you have in it is just rolling up your sleeves and getting some of that sweat equity, putting in the time to get yourself noticed. A lot of people think that content marketing, though, is only like social media, or maybe they have a blog, or whatever be the case, even if you have a podcast or an email newsletter. But, you know, even the ebook, the other pillar, what goes on with all of this stuff? Where's everything housed? I want to take us all the way back. We're going to bring it back, and I'm talking about back to what it is that I originally started doing and still do to this day. But I see the content marketing stuff take an even bigger chunk of my time and business as opposed to the web development end of things. It's originally how I started. I've been doing websites. I want to say since 2000. That's when I founded my business. Believe it or not, right out of high school. I was actually doing websites in high school in 1999. We had a tremendous person who donated to the high school that I went to, and we had a very lavish, state-of-the-art computer lab. Actually, more than one. We had a lot of computer courses, so I was very fortunate at a young age to acquire some of these skills. But you're probably saying, well, how'd you learn about podcasting? How'd you learn about ebooks? Well, none of these things existed. Social media, forget about it. There wasn't even MySpace back then. I mean, we're talking about Windows 95 and Windows 98 era here. Dial-up modem. Beep, boop, beep, boop. For those of you who remember that. And if you were my age back then and you were younger, you'd have the parents yell at you. Otherwise, you were adulting and people just couldn't call in on your busy phone line. But it kind of evolved into all of that, all of the different internet technologies and new media and working with marketing and things of that nature. And of course, by just nature itself, I happen to tend to be a writer and I like to talk. So all of these things kind of fall under one umbrella for me. But, you know, when I talk about all of these pillars, all of these things with content marketing, whether it be a blog or a podcast, social media, the one consistent thing that all of them, the common denominator for all of those things, is that you have a decent website. And that is the one assumption that I just ran off in a tangent. I took the football and just booted it. You know, it went in the air 60 yards and then tumbled another 80. It was amazing, incredible. So I kicked it so far away from the website topic that now it's time to bring it back the other way down the field. So you got to have a good website. And I know a lot of people out there, there's people, believe it or not, that still do not have a website. They only believe in, they got a Facebook page. Well, that's great. That might get you by a little bit, but you're seriously restricted on what it is you can do. It may work for you. That's great. Facebook has a lot of features. People can contact you, but Facebook isn't yours. Facebook can close tomorrow, and then you're out of luck. Your website has to be basically your online brochure, your online business card, the face of your business. And if it looks like it was made when I was in high school back in 1999, it's time for an update. Plus, I want to go through some things that are very important for a website to have. And I also want to give you some tips on to maybe have that better organized. Now, I know not everyone out there can build websites. I know there are tools and services that are advertised to build websites for as cheap as $1 a month or whatever. Okay, to call some of those out, Wix is terrible. If you make your website with Wix and you're just a novice, don't use it. It's going to make you look worse because even if it has this fancy whiz-bang widget, it's going to be floating somewhere on the page. It is just, let's put it this way. It's a gimmick just to get a lot of people to sign up for it. If I could get a million people to give me $1 a month, which would be awesome, by the way, go ahead. I could give you my PayPal or a Patreon to donate to. But just think about it. I mean, that's kind of where they're at. And to no lesser extent, GoDaddy used to have a very awful website builder. I don't know if they still have that around. They're basically just reselling you WordPress, which, if you're on WordPress.org, the software is free and can be hosted by any hosting company. You don't need just GoDaddy for that. And then you get into the type of things I do, such as custom WordPress sites. There's also Drupal. If you're not familiar with these things, a lot of them started as blogging platforms. They're now what's known as a CMS or content management system, which means you could update them on your own. Now, you can't do everything, and making sure they're properly set up, you should probably seek someone with at least some experience or knowledge of these systems. But before you even get to that, and this is what made me think of it, is like when someone approaches me about, hey, you know what, Joe, I'm looking for a website. And it's like, what would that cost? And you're just having a friendly conversation amongst friends, family gatherings and things like that. And it kind of snowballs because it's like, well, I want a car. How much does that cost? Well, it depends on the car, right? Are you going to get a Chevy? Are you going to get a Cadillac? Or are you just going to get out of the whole General Motors realm there and go for a BMW? 2-door, 4-door? Maybe you want a truck. Maybe you want a sunroof. Maybe you need leather seats. If you see where I'm getting at, it all depends on the various options. Every situation is unique. It's kind of like almost like building a house as well. And you got to make sure you have a very good foundation. So I'm going to talk about things such as navigation. I'm going to talk about stuff so people could get around the site real easy and find everything, because one of my other mottos, and I haven't really gotten to this yet, but I know people like to, every single thing you have is important, and you want to jam 10 pounds of garbage in a garbage bag that only holds 5 pounds, and it's going to be overflowing, and it's distracting, and guess what else? Because it's garbage, it stinks. So, what does your website absolutely need? I was going around the internet, and I love some of the stuff that people put up is their own blog posts, getting their search engine optimization or SEO stuff going here on their own blogs. It's just not the best advice in the world. They're telling you things like, you need your contact information on it. Well, that's a no-brainer. And if you don't have it, shame on you. Now, one thing I don't necessarily like to do is put your email address on a website anywhere. Don't do it unless you want lots of junk mail. Your spam box is going to be so full of Russian bots and everything else, offering you everything from, prescription drugs or drugs to help you in the bedroom to, well, that's pretty much what a whole lot of them are. Or you're going to get the stuff where it says, Dear Sir or Madam, you won a lottery and name some country halfway across the world. It's fake. You didn't win anything. If you want to avoid those types of things, don't put your email on your website. Now, how is somebody supposed to get a hold of you? Well, that's what contact forms are for. They kind of obscure or hide your email address by filling out. I know you've seen these before. You fill out a name. You put your own email in it. You put maybe a little message, or there may even be a drop down or check boxes for what specifically it is you're looking to do. You may be able to even put in a phone number, request callback, or whether you prefer an email or a phone call. So as far as a contact form, bingo, that's like one of the first big ones you got to have, a contact page. You got to have your address on there. You got to have your phone number. If anything, an address and phone number, if you can, you have a well-built website, you have a web developer you could contact, or just ask me, contact me. I can help you with these type of things. You got to have it the footer. The footer is the very bottom of your website. It's usually like it's highlighted a little different. I'm trying to not call it a call out because we call other things call outs, but it stands alone. It anchors the bottom part of your page. It's like a sandwich. It's the bottom part of the bun. And it usually has a lot of your links everywhere else, but address and phone number. A lot of people are coming to your website only for that. That's why I also say don't get discouraged. If you start getting into deep, detailed things like Google Analytics and you're looking at your website statistics and people are just leaving, it might be just because they want your phone number or your address, and that's understandable. The other thing is, too, speaking of Google, a long time ago I had a client that was upset. They weren't showing up on Google Maps. And if you happen to know how Google works, you don't really submit much of anything to Google. Yeah, there's a couple things you could do, Webmaster Tools, the console, things like that. But in all honesty, it's really just Google, their algorithm, the thing they call the spiders that crawl around the internet and gather this information and then bring it back to Google. If you don't have your address on your website, don't expect to be found. And that's specifically what this client had asked. They, for some reason, wanted to live off the grid or have some sort of anonymity, and then they didn't show up on Google Maps and they were upset about it. Well, you didn't want your address on your website. So if you don't have your physical address, your mailing address, not like a P.O. box, but your physical address on your website, you're not going to be found. Plain and simple. So the contact form, the phone number, that stuff, that's paramount. So you obviously need a contact page, and contact or contact us should be one of the top anchors in your navigation bar. The navigation bar is the big one for me because this is mostly the hierarchy, or this is the skeleton, the foundation of your website. It's got to be easy to go through. And a lot of things you're going to find there, commonly anyway, is a home button to go back to your home page. The contact page, the big one there. I mean, usually you have a home page, contact page at the very minimum, right? Obviously, if you have something to say about yourself and it's a little more drawn out, or you want to talk about different people on your team or within your business, you're going to have an about page. Maybe even flesh that out a little more with like a staff directory or something like that. But I'll talk about that in a second, because sometimes there's people who want a staff directory. They want this big elaborate thing, and you got 90 employees. Well, guess what? It takes a lot of time for not only yourself to gather all of this information. If you take the pictures yourself and you're trying to save money instead of hiring photographers or doing anything like that, and then if you don't enter all that data on your own, you got to pay somebody like me, a web developer, to enter all of that information, and that takes a lot more time, which costs a lot more money. So you got to keep some features and functionality in mind when you're doing this. But a home page, a contact page, an about page for sure. A news page. I mean, this is your blog. You might not want to call it a blog. It all depends on your industry, how you feel, how you think other people will feel as far as your professionalism when they see that. But it's the kitchen sink where you put everything. It's one of my pillars. You got to have it. Just there is no ifs, ands, or buts there. You could have, or you should have, I should say, services and product pages. Now, one of the big things is if you don't want to make something like wordy. So if you have like these products that have big long names, usually you just have a product, you click on it. If you have like a little drop down, you might put the wordier stuff under there. What you don't want to do is, what does ABC company offer to you? ? This big, long, wordy link in your navigation menu. Why? Don't do that. It's going to make things break to 2 lines, or if your site's not designed for that, then things go to a second line or they disappear off the page, other things. You don't want to do anything like that. Trust me. It's just very tacky. And when you get really wordy with those type of things, the one thing you got to really think about, and this is very important too with the way websites are designed these days, you got to give some consideration, at least, to smartphones, tablets like your iPad, things of that nature. Because if you have something that's called a responsive website, and that means your website works on both the small screen, like these smart devices, or on a traditional laptop or desktop computer, the bigger screens, as I call them, well, that means it adapts to any of that. If it isn't responsive, that's really bad news, because Google is going to promote when you look and search on your phone, from your phone, I should say, it will always give preference to those sites that are mobile optimized. That meaning they are designed to work on a smartphone, on an iPhone, on an Android phone. So you definitely have to keep that in mind. And when you use these big, long, wordy phrases, that's going to break that little menu you use on the mobile end of things as well. So I've already mentioned, let's see, home, contact, about, and your blog. You can pretty much get away with just that, but I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of bigger offerings. You have products or services, like I was saying. If you happen to have a podcast or you get into the area of having a podcast, I believe that should be one of your main top-level links. Maybe even just something as simple as like what I do, which is just another way of saying about sometimes, but it's what I have on my website. I also have guides and I have resources because I have things that are pinned. You may have a shopping cart that may get more involved. It depends. There are services that have some of that stuff built in, like a Shopify. You may still need help with a web developer there. It all depends. Obviously, with WordPress as well, I should bring this up. You can buy what's called themes or these templates for many of these platforms, but a lot of times you're going to be handcuffed in the way that certain things work, the way photos look if you insert photos. And by all means, please, there are two things with photos on a website. If you make them too big, then they take too long to load, like we were talking about the old AOL screeching dial-up. You remember when it used to load line by line, like it was almost printing it on a very, very old, slow printer. That is when you loaded pictures. Do not load full-size pictures onto your website. At the same time, if you put something that's the size of a thumbnail, people are going to try and click on it like it's actually a thumbnail and make it bigger. And if it's no bigger than a thumbnail, that also looks bad too. So you got to find a happy medium when it comes to resizing your photos. And that may be a tip that I'm going to have to go through here in the near future because there's a number of programs that'll help you edit your images. So aside from your main navigation, links to other things, well, you may have pricing. Anything that you sell, obviously, you should try and promote and put up front. If you have anything that's like causes you donate to or something like a support type deal that you want to put there, or even donate to your own cause, let's say it's a nonprofit that you're operating, you want to put those things front and center as well. So you definitely gotta come up with some ideas on how to make sure you have maybe about 6 plus or minus 1, I would say, is probably a healthy number, and that's including that little home link. That's including your contact link among your top level links. And then below that, if you have some sub-menu links like in a drop-down, well, if you start getting a lot of things together and they start to get kind of muddled, what you might want to do is consolidate those under one main header. So, for example, the link over on joekuzma.com on my website for what I do, you'll notice I didn't put blog, podcast, social media. I didn't put those 5 pillars individually, even though those are the big things. Those are the things I do, promote, offer, and sell. It's under what I do. Now, why did I do that? Well, number one, I already have a lot of real estate taken up on my website between the home link and guides and resources and other things I felt were just as important. Number two, this puts everything together under one roof. So the 5 things that I do, and there's many other things I do. I wear so many hats, you wouldn't believe it. These 5 things are now all together, so there's no confusion on if you click on blog, that's my blog that I'm writing versus the service blog that I offer to write, proofread, etc., blogs and articles for clients. So put everything under one roof, try and consolidate, make it make sense. Now, if this has got you feeling a little cross-eyed here, the biggest and easiest way to get this across, whether it's your own planning or whether you're trying to obtain a quote for budget or anything else from another web developer or firm, or you're even trying to see if one of these cheapo websites or template builders or whatever works for you, I'm telling you, you get what you pay for. You waste your time with some of that, but to each their own. what you want to do is you got to have a plan. You got to have like a roadmap. And the easiest thing is like pull up something like Microsoft Word or one of its competitors and just hit that little button that creates the bullet list and all of your main bullets, boom. And if you have things for drop downs, promote and demote. That means move them left or right, push those, kind of indent those bullets in, and you figure out what's underneath that. And then you kind of have an idea of how many pages or links that you have on your site and just how many things you have to create content for if you don't already have an existing website. If you do have an existing website, what you should do is do the same thing for everything that you have, every single page, lay it out the same way, and then start figuring out, well, this page only has like 3 sentences on it. This one was never even used. We were planning on doing it. It still says coming soon. You can start to consolidate some of those things together and make it a little bit easier for everyone to get around. And this is something that I commonly, I can't tell you how many times I do this when I'm rebuilding, revamping, making new websites for people with existing websites, for businesses and clients that already have something that's out there, but they're not necessarily thrilled with it. It's usually because it's hard to get around on the site. And for anybody who visits it, they're just as confused. And you're kind of sometimes handcuffed because you may have been using a website builder or template or piece of software that forced you to do these type of things. There was no way to maybe create a drop down or do this or do that. So another big thing, I think I don't want to forget this before I sign off here on tips for your website, things your website needs. If you are on social media and you have social media pages or you do have a podcast, you got to have the links for all that stuff on your site. In fact, if you end up posting a podcast on there, I think every single podcast post or episode that you produce has to have links to everywhere you could listen to your show. If you just look at my show notes, there's a good example there. But at the very least, if you're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever it may be, you got to have links to those things on somewhere on your website. Not always in the header. There might be space for that. And just so you know, the header is the top button. And that's usually where your logo is. You might want a phone number up there. I know a lot, if you're dealing with the template, a lot of times they don't accommodate this because these are people who only work in the internet world. They don't think about traditional phone calls and why a phone call might be easier or better to establish communication. So keep that in mind too. I see that far too often where you don't have it. Now the address, that could go in the footer, and there's nothing wrong with redundancy. Put the address and phone number in the footer, put the phone number back up top. You're going to have your main links up top in the header. You're going to have them in the footer too. Have them on both buttons because you know what? Usually that same stuff follows you around on every single page of your website, depending on how it's built. I know when I build them, it's identical and it's done on purpose. It's intentional. So people become familiar with the top. They become familiar with the bottom of your website, and they know where to look to get around in case they get lost. Maybe they click on like 3 things and don't know how to get back to where they originally were. Oh, there it is. It's in the footer. Oh, there it is. It's in the header. But social media, if they have a spot in the header, go ahead, put it up there. I'm not always the biggest fan of doing that because not everyone is on social media. Not everyone wants to deal with social media. And I just did an entire episode on why you can't rely solely on social media. So check that out if you haven't already. I talked about contact info. I talked about navigation. There's always some tips about things you could put like on your homepage. If it needs to be short, sweet, and simple, I mean, hey, a nice engaging photo is always great, or maybe a banner that rotates. It depends on your industry, and it depends if you have photography that could support it. Because sometimes even purchasing stock photography, which are very professional photos, but you may not be able to find something that is in your niche. If you're able to take photos yourself, and mind you, you want the photos to also reflect you in a positive light. So if they're bad photos, don't use them. But good photos, usually a little bit about yourself, maybe something about your services. Some people like to put blog updates, podcast updates, testimonials, or case studies from their clients. a video, if you have something professional, maybe even a commercial that you had somebody produce. These type of things that can all go on the homepage. They don't need to be on every page though. So try to limit your header and footer and make it simplified so people can get around your website. And of course, the big marketing thing is always a call to action. If you need to have a button or you need to have something stand out, go for it. But if you already have a very well-formed header and main navigation menu, you may have already done 90 to 100% of that work already, and your call to action, everything is very clear. If you have 20 links in your main navigation menu, then obviously you have some work to do. So if you have any questions on this topic, and I know some of you had some questions on some of the previous shows, I'm going to swing back around and try to get to some of that information, clear some things up on your questions about blogs, podcasts, social media, email marketing, and ebooks. So until next time, my name is Joe Kuzma. I encourage everyone to be safe, be good, and hopefully I will catch you later. Hi folks, this is Joe Kuzma. No, don't worry, you're not hearing things twice. I'm just here to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening to today's show and being a follower and subscriber of the Discontent Podcast. And I want to remind you that if you're interested in more information about all the various things it is that I do, whether it be about this show, content marketing, or you want to ask a question, you may visit me at joekuzma.com. That's JOEKUZMA.com. Or you can follow me as well on Facebook. Make sure you get the page and not the personal profile. Sorry, it's only for friends and family. Also on Twitter at Joe_Kuzma, LinkedIn or Instagram. Also, don't forget, if you haven't already, subscribe, whether that be on iTunes, YouTube, or your favorite podcast provider, so you don't miss out on any of the great episodes that we have. Once again, thank you again for your support, and I look forward, as always, to speaking and interacting with each of you again soon.